Hey everybody, how are you doing today? I tell you what, I am so glad to see you. I really am. And that's all the time. I'm always glad to see you. And I want to take a moment to say thank you very much for tuning in to me. I really do appreciate it. And I would definitely like to welcome all of you to another episode of TJ's Topics. I tell you, such a pleasure to be with you. And of course, I am TJ. And I consider it a joy, an honor, and a privilege just to be able to come into your presence on any given occasion. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being with me today. Now, on today, I do have something else that I would like to discuss for a short time. And it's something that has, I don't know, it came to me. Actually, it came to me as a result of an Instagram post that I saw this morning. And there was this bishop in Chicago who I guess he had a telecast years ago. It looked like, based on the footage that I saw, it looked like it was something that was taped back in the 80s. And I scrolled through a few of the comments, and they were talking about how he used to be a pimp back in the day. And then later on, he supposedly changed his life, and he turned his life around, and then he became a preacher. Well, have y'all noticed the trend lately? I mean, it seems as if a lot of these pop-up churches that we see now, they tend to be led by pastors who once upon a time were all out in the street doing any and everything. I mean, they were gang bangers, they were drug dealers, dope addicts, and they were pimping out women left and right, trying to get money off of them. I mean, running all kinds of games on people. That seems to be the case, especially in a certain demographic. Now, it may not be as prevalent across the board in terms of demographics, nationwide and worldwide, but in certain demographics, we tend to see stuff like this. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about what pimps and preachers have in common. And believe me, they do tend to have a lot of things in common, as we're going to see here in just a moment. What pimps and preachers have in common. Now, what are some of the things that pimps and preachers have in common? Well, we know that they both tend to be stylish gentlemen. They both have excellent taste in fashion, as we've seen many times. If you've ever watched music videos like hip hop artists and stuff, namely Snoop Dogg and a few others, and you know how Snoop dresses. And then you've probably seen certain preachers dressed the same way, and back in the 70s, a lot of them had had a certain style. They had perms, and they were slick talking men, had those sharp designer suits, and usually you could find them driving Cadillacs. That used to be the big car back in the day that preachers and pimps drove, Cadillacs. And oftentimes, both the pimp and the preacher were the same guy. Well, here we are now in 2024, and it seems as if not much has changed. I mean, you still got the same old stuff going on. They're still running these same old games, trying to play these same old tricks. But as the saying goes, The devil doesn't have new tricks. He just has new faces. A new generation, but the same old thing. So that's what we're talking about. What pimps and preachers have in common. So let's look at the first thing that they have in common. Number one, both of them usually have money, and they both know how to go about getting their hands on it. They know how to ask for money, how to seek out money making opportunities and all that. They both tend to earn their living off the backs of others. Now, I want you to keep in mind, this is not descriptive of every preacher that we know out here. We're not talking about all preachers. I wouldn't dare categorize all preachers under the same umbrella. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm talking about certain ones, the ones that we see doing these type of things. And we know that they're just getting over on the people, And the people are very unsuspecting of anything. They don't take time to notice anything. They don't pay attention to anything. They're just basically going through the motions and going with the flow, handing over their hard-earned money to these folk. Same thing that people do with pimps, and they get their hands on money however they can and they use it on themselves. So there it is. Number two, both pimps and preachers have flocks. A preacher has a congregation, which is his flock, and pimps have their prostitutes or their whores. They're whores, hoes. And those hoes are their flocks, their flock. And, in other words, they're their followers. That's what they are. The congregation follows the preacher, and the prostitutes or the whores follow the pimps. So that's commonality number two. Now, what's the third thing that pimps and preachers have in common? Both pimps and preachers have a way with words. They know how to persuade people to go along with them and buy into their schemes. And they both know how to get into people's heads. They know exactly what to say and how to say it in order to make people fall for whatever it is that they're being told. They know how to hype up everybody, get people all emotional and stuff. And if you ever sit in a church service on most Sundays, and I can speak in terms of the Black church because that's what I've been a part of my entire life. If you ever sit during a service on any given Sunday, when the spirit is high and people are jumping and shouting and running all over the place and falling out on the floor and stuff, that is usually the time when most preachers tend to use that to their advantage, because immediately after all that praise and worship and all that hoopla settles, then that's when they start asking for money. They start telling them this and that and like making all these promises and stuff. God is getting ready to do this and do that in their lives. And then you have all the members in there who are watching this play out. You may have, and if they're a televised ministry, they'll have people at home watching these things happen. And they're falling for it also. They're believing it, especially those who are not awake and aware like you and I are. Because I'm sure that there are many of you out there who are watching right now who are aware of what time it is and what's going on. You are fully awake. And therefore, you know not to buy into all this stuff anymore because most of it is not real anyway. I mean, a lot of this stuff is fake, you know? I mean, we've seen this down through the years where a lot of this stuff was fake and they were exposed in the process. So now, number 4, both of them like to exercise their power. Preachers usurp their authority in the sanctuary, and pimps usurp their authority in the street. You know, they love to run stuff. You know, it makes them feel good when they're in control, or at least they think they're in control. They've been made to believe that they are the big time shot callers. You know, they want to feel as if they are above everybody else. You know, they don't have to play by the rules like all of their subordinates. And the members are the subordinates. And the whores are the subordinates to the pimp. You know, the members are the subordinates to the pastor or the preacher. So there you have it. And see, it's all about hierarchy. That's the thing. You know, you have this system of hierarchy in the church, which is something that most of us have never cared for. At least I know I haven't. You know, it's like you have certain levels to power and influence. You know, certain positions are looked upon, and then certain positions are looked down on. You know, I tell you, it's crazy. It really is. And that's the way it is in the secular world. You know, people tend to look up to the CEOs and presidents, vice presidents, and stuff like that. But then they look down on people like the secretaries and the assistants and the janitors, you know, the custodians and stuff. They look down on them. But I'm going to tell you, and I'm speaking from experience now, if it were not for the lower paid people, the ones who they consider to be on the low end of the totem pole, it wouldn't be too much that those up on the high end could do. If you remove all of the lower people, you know, the secretaries and your custodians and all your different assistants and stuff in various capacities, see how far that company goes and how long it lasts. Because it wouldn't be too much that those big time folk could do. Because I haven't seen a CEO clean a toilet yet. You're not going to see him put out trash. You're not going to see him cleaning up, running vacuum cleaners and dusting, doing windows and stripping and waxing floors. You're not going to see them doing that unless it's on a rare occasion where they absolutely have to. But no, because they feel like it's all about them and they want to be seen and heard and noticed. And nobody notices the lowly janitor and the and the secretary and all them the lower people. They don't think too much about them. But it's all good though. Number 5. Both of them, that is, both the preacher and the pimp, gravitate towards the finer things in life, such as houses, cars, jewelry, and women. They have a thing for luxury vehicles, such as Cadillacs and Lexus, which is a glorified Toyota, but it's still somewhat luxury, nonetheless, luxurious. Mercedes, Bentleys, BMWs, and the vast majority of Lincolns that are made, like the Lincoln Navigator and stuff like that. Nice high-end vehicles. That's what they like. And all the other things that I just mentioned, they have a thing for. You know, they're always talking about how much they want this and that. You know, the big houses and the big cars and And, you see them sporting a lot of jewelry, diamond rings and they have it. Like some of them wear the earrings and stuff, gold chains, gold watches and bracelets. Oh man. Then some of them have gold teeth in their mouth. So that's how you can identify them. Number 6, both of them expect uncompromising loyalty and obedience. Pimps expect their whores to listen and obey. Meanwhile, preachers expect their congregations, their members, to listen to them and obey. And then in the case of preachers, in the church, they like to quote that passage in the Old Testament a lot. I think it's in is it First Samuel, maybe First Samuel. I forgot the chapter, but anyway, it's in the Old Testament. Obedience is better than sacrifice, and I used to hear that a lot right at the time when we were getting ready to raise the offering. When they want people to pay their tithes and stuff, 10%, and that verse was always quoted. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Now, mind you, I read that entire chapter, and that verse had nothing to do with money. Matter of fact, the majority of the Bible verses that these preachers use to try to coerce their members into giving all this money have absolutely nothing to do with money, period. It's never been about that. But they'll take those verses and twist them around to make them say whatever it is that they want them to say in order that they might carry out their agenda and further their own personal causes. So that's how it goes. And finally, number 7, both of them typically run their businesses in the same locality. In other words, they tend to operate within the same area. And in the case of the Black neighborhood, we know that to be true, because in most Black neighborhoods, there are a lot of churches everywhere on every corner. And then not very far from those churches, you'll run into these guys who I guess they're running these prostitute rings and, whatever you call them. And, when they're pimping out their whores and stuff, they're prostitutes. They have them posing on the street corners and stuff all up and down the street on different blocks. They're waiting on their customers. And whoever decides to pull over and patronize them, well, that's who they go with. They'll get in the car and go with them. They'll find a spot and go and take care of their business, and the customer will pay and then move on. That's how it goes. And then once those prostitutes have made all that money that they can make in a day's time, they got to go back to their headquarters and hand it all over to their pimps. The pimp is their supervisor, of course. And if he's in a good mood, he may give them a cut of it, so they can kind of get a little something for themselves. But the majority of that money goes to the pimp. And so it is in the church. A lot of the offerings that are raised, depending on what kind of church it is, a lot of that money is going to pay the pastor's salary, and so he can buy him a new car and a new house and this and that, take vacations and get him a private jet and all sorts of things. So I'm going to end it with this. See, both pimps and preachers tend to operate in the capacity of an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur is a person who starts a business and is willing to risk loss in order to make money. And such is the case with a lot of these pop-up churches. These up-and-coming preachers, the ones who perhaps this time last year was out there pimping or or pushing dope or or what have you, all of a sudden they've had an epiphany and they have turned their life around suddenly, and now they got a church. And they're trying to get as many members in there as they can because more members equals more money. And so it's all about, the dollar. Yeah, it's about God. It is. God, the G-O-D. And G-O-D stands for good old dollar. And lastly, I would like to say that in terms of pimps and preachers being entrepreneurs, in other words, running businesses, preachers sell Jesus. And of course, they peddle the word of God, the Bible, or what we call the word of God, along with broken promises and false hope. Meanwhile, pimps rent out their women, and the women in turn sell their bodies. Basically, they rent themselves out to these various men who come along. So it's just all a money thing. That's all it is. It's all about that dollar. It's about God. G-O-D, the good old dollar. What a mighty God we serve. That's an old song we used to sing years ago when I was in the choir. But anything can be God. I tell you. So that's all I got to say on that. What pimps and preachers have in common. And feel free to share your thoughts on your experiences with pimps and preachers and things. If you've had any experiences in the past in church or what have you, out in the community or whatever, and you've seen these things take place, feel free to leave it in the comments or whatever, and I'll read them and reply. Okay? So I want to say thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of TJ's Topics. And believe me, I am truly grateful to have had you with me on today. It means the world to me. And it certainly means the world to me to know that this little thing that I got going on is actually impacting somebody's life somewhere out there in this world, and I'm very grateful for that. So be sure to tune in again next time, okay? And I look forward to seeing you then. This is Taryn Jerome Harris, reminding you that every round goes higher and higher. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.